that the moment I did something to help myself in that way, I felt guilty. There was something so broken with that.
Real truth was that I didn't love myself.
But it doesn't mean that we're moved to act.
I'm constantly hearing myself, and it's negative and it sucks.
What can I do to alleviate that suffering?
It felt almost like fake nice. That was weird.
So what I found, and what I'd really, really like to dive in on at the start of our discussion, is like the myths that are really built around self-compassion. And when I say myths, I mean that we somehow perceive that being compassionate to other people is wonderful, but that when we're compassionate to ourselves, somehow there's like this tag on of guilt that comes into play. And we start down the path maybe of compassion and self-compassion, and then we kind of make it worse because suddenly we start to feel guilty that we're having compassion toward ourselves somewhere along the way. And it brings us, it amplifies the situation. Whatever we were holding self-compassion toward is now amplified because, wait a second, if I'm being compassionate to myself, it's taking away from the opportunity to be compassionate towards someone else, right? And so all of a sudden, we're going down a rabbit hole of, okay, now I have this side of guilt along with what I was already dealing with for taking time to feel compassionate toward myself around what I was navigating. So now everything is just a mess. So in everyday life, how do you really allow yourself? You hear, okay, or maybe you've heard that self-compassion is actually a great practice to open up the gateways for self-love and inner strength. But the moment you attempt to open that door, it's like slam. So some of the myths are, how do you navigate that without the guilt, right? And so I want to kind of talk to you about some of the myths and some of the things that you navigated as we went through this too, because you had this. You started down the self-compassion pathway and had some of these things pop up for you too. So what are some of the common myths that you would say exist around self-compassion?
Yeah. Well, first, it really felt like when I first attempted it, it felt like platitudes. It felt like it felt almost like fake nice. That was weird. And it was like I didn't know.
Fake nice to yourself?
Fake nice to myself, yeah. Because I was like, I don't know how to do this. And it's like, oh, well, I love myself. And it's like, oh, but do I? Like, it's like, just because I'm saying it doesn't mean I actually mean it. But I would have no problem, going out of my way to be compassionate and loving to someone else. But when I felt it and when I was saying it, it was like I was attempting to like push it away. And I wasn't even allowing myself to actually receive some type of love or compliment or compassion to me, because like you just said, it triggered that guilt. It triggered like, this is silly. And I think it really ultimately, it's great to talk about the myths around it, but I also want to see like, what is the truth behind it? The real truth was that I didn't love myself and I didn't want to accept that. And so giving self-compassion, providing compassion to myself was pointing out an area that I was unwilling to accept. That was the hardest part for me. And so Yes, I felt the guilt. I felt almost the shame. It's like, why am I so willing to just go out of my way for the people I love and not willing to do that for myself?
Yeah. And I think that brings up a really good point, and the difference between like empathy and sympathy and compassion, which I think is another, when we're talking about myth busting here,
Yeah.
is an important thing to myth bust, because we kind of integrate these things together and they're not technically the same, right? So when we have empathy and sympathy, we feel like we have a compassionate feeling in a way toward what someone is going through. Like we have care for their suffering. But it doesn't mean that we're moved to act. And it's the same for us. Like we can understand our suffering. Like we might have empathy and sympathy for what we're going through, right? But it doesn't mean that we're moved to act to alleviate that suffering. Where compassion crosses over is that move to act, to do something about that suffering, to in some way help, and however we can, do something to change the circumstances, do something to shift what is happening to help alleviate whatever that suffering is. And so for me, when it came to that guilt that I was feeling, when I would have self-compassion, I was like, all right, one way I can myth bust is, why is it okay for me to go out and have compassion for other people, be moved to act to alleviate their suffering, whether it's kind acts of service or financially or however I was doing it. Like I would give all of myself to help someone else through these acts of compassion. But then when I was looking at my own suffering across all layers of myself, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, I felt guilty when I desired to have compassion, when I would look at that suffering and then desire to do something to alleviate it. What was that about? What programming did I allow in myself? How did I allow my inner critic to get in there and take such stronghold that the moment I did something to help myself in that way, I felt guilty? There was something so broken with that. And when I looked at my faith and all of the things that, because I studied so many different faiths and belief systems across the world, and nearly all of them had some component of helping yourself in order to be helped in some fashion, some way. And then I look at compassion, self-compassion, and I'm like, well, that's exactly what that is. So there is a key to unlock the ability to have the strength in myself to then offer more compassion outside of myself, because I now know what I need in order to go out and help others in their plight, whatever that might be. Mm-hmm. But I can't just wait around for somebody else to know what I need, because if I'm suffering mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, I'm inside here. I'm the one that knows what's going on. I can't say, Austin, figure this out for me, because you're not inside here. You don't know what's happening inside of me. You can take like guesses and estimates, but you still won't know 100%, because I'm the only one who is in true deep connection with my suffering, whatever that might be. And so the best person to act on my suffering to alleviate it is me.
Right. Yeah, it's like asking a personal trainer to lose the weight for you.
Exactly.
It's like that's not gonna work. That's such a good point. And I think you bring up a really interesting aspect of faith and cultures where that is the teaching, but it almost seems like the action that has been accepted over generations and generations, to the point where like people are wearing it as a badge of honor, is kind of the opposite. It is the self-sacrificing. That shows compassion for others. It's just more important than the self-compassion. And I think that's where this disconnect has really occurred, especially in a world today where it's like we've got so many distractions. We've got with selfies and personal brands and all these things coming forward. It's like, okay, it's all focused on the self. And so almost like narcissism has kind of gone upwards. And so it's like the need to like prove that you aren't a narcissist has taken hold. And it's like, okay, now I need to be more self-sacrificing just to show that I'm not. And so it's almost like we're digging deeper as a culture where it's kind of one or the other, recognizing that self-compassion doesn't play in either field. It's its own thing that is really something that we all should be responsible for and aware of and focused on, that it is not ego-driven, it is love-driven. Yeah. And when we can be compassionate to ourselves, then oh my gosh, we have then more ability to be compassionate to those around us. And so if our true goal, like a goal of someone who is self-sacrificing, is to be compassionate to the around them, then why wouldn't they desire to be like to choose the way that provides more compassion to those around them? Okay. Well, then that is through self-compassion, because you can only give what you have. Otherwise, you're completely limited. The more compassion you give to yourself, then you begin the unlimited aspect to your giving.
Yes, 100%. And we've said this in other podcasts, like you cannot give what you can have within yourself, right? So you have to have it in order to give it.
Yes.
Therefore, if you desire to be a compassionate person, then you have to have self-compassion. It's a practice that must go on within you. And that is one of the things in psychology and coaching that we're learning, is someone who practices self-compassion and really hones that skill within them. It is so much easier for them to identify a space where someone is in need of compassion, and then to take the act to act upon that compassion, to recognize when to move past empathy and sympathy and actually provide that act of compassion. And so to allow yourself, because not every situation is going to call for compassion, right? Sometimes people are just looking for your empathy or your sympathy. If you've been in a situation that is like theirs, then allow yourself to connect with them and say, I understand what you're going through. I have been in a similar situation, and so I do understand the deep suffering that you're navigating. And so if you would like someone to talk to, I will be here to listen and do nothing more. And maybe that's what that person needs. Maybe they do not need you to act. They just need you to be there.
Yeah.
But if you have enough self-compassion to know that that's what you navigated when you went through it, and all you needed was someone to hold space for you, even if that person was you, then you know that that person that you are holding space for doesn't need you to act. The action they need from you is no action. Then that's the best gift that you can give them. But if you've not done that for yourself, then you have no idea what that person actually needs.
Right.
You're disconnected.
Absolutely. It's so important to say that. And when you do act, let's do a quick reframe. Would you rather give compassion from a place of an energetic feeling that is driven by sadness, shame, and guilt? Or would you rather give your action of love from a place of confidence, abundance, and true, deep, authentic love?
Yeah.
So if we can really reframe that and pull away from the self-sacrificing sentiment that we have,
The
myth, right?
Right.
And it is beautiful in its desire, but flawed in its execution.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an important thing to be aware of. So if we can really reframe that and understand, like, okay, we deeply desire to gift that love and gift of yourself and share that compassion, because it shows the human in me sees the human in you. The love in me sees the love in you. And I want to put action to that. Like, I'm not just, talk doesn't cook rice kind of thing. Like, this is like a real, like, I'm putting action to this thing.
What was that again?
Talk doesn't cook rice.
Okay, then.
Yeah, it's an old proverb.
Okay. New to me.
Yeah. And actually, like, put some real action behind it. And I think that's where that self-sacrificing, that badge of honor stems from. People really want to show, like, I'm not in it I'm not just talking it, I'm walking it here. Awesome. Well, let's reframe that and let's put that energy and let's shift away from that guilt, that shame, that sadness, that loneliness that pulls upon, and really gift all of that love through action from that space of confidence and authentic love and abundance.
Yes. Hi, I'm your host, Amber, and I am here with Austin on the Heart Leader podcast. We are so grateful that you are tuning in to be with us. To never miss an episode, take a moment right now to click the subscribe button below and give us a like so we know we're creating content that you really enjoy. And that really gets into, like, our first practical tool,
yes.
Right? Because ultimately, if we're going to give it, we have to practice it, yes. Right? We have to be able to do this in our own life in a way that can integrate into our own life.
Yeah.
And one of the first ways I've found to do that for me was to actually set aside time to listen to myself, right? To have that space, to have a dialogue, which sounds kind of crazy, right?
Staff meeting.
Yeah.
Personal staff meeting.
We have those a lot.
Yes.
But when you do that, talk about an opportunity to open the gateway for self-compassion, to truly understand your own areas of suffering across all layers of yourself, and have a dialogue to understand what you need in order to alleviate that suffering. Mm. And I always equate it to, like, we're running an organization, right? And so if we just constantly had everyone coming to us all the time, whenever, then we're just herding cats. But if we have set times when we know, all right, we're going to talk to this section of the organization at this point in time, and this section of the organization at this point in time, and we just have it broken out into a schedule, then they get 100% of our focus at that point in time. And when we're not with them, then they queue up questions, they get things done, they're in a flow, and it allows them and it empowers them to know the direction from our conversation during the off time and to collect whatever they need to talk to us in the next conversation. Otherwise, it's just like, wow, and we're all over the place. Yeah. Well, it's the same for me and my own inner dialogue, right? That inner critic will constantly, nah, and my thoughts will go crazy. And that critic will just grab onto that. And as we've talked about in some previous podcasts, it loves to cycle and that negative brain bias and take those negative thoughts and just cycle. But if I have my personal staff meeting and I know a few times a week, I'm going to take like 15 minutes and I'm just going to sit with myself and be with my thoughts and my feelings. And I'm going to allow myself to feel through, all right, where am I suffering right now? Am I suffering right now? Maybe everything is just phenomenal and there is no suffering, but it at least gives me time to feel through that and do it across all levels of self. All right, physically, is there any suffering going on? Do I feel tension in my body anywhere? And I feel like bound up. Okay, yes, my neck and my shoulders from typing all day. That I'm starting to really feel that going on. So then, in an act of self-compassion, what can I do to alleviate that suffering? Maybe it's as simple as putting a heating pad on my neck and shoulders while I'm typing to allow it to relax me. Fantastic. Now I know I've had a dialogue with myself and I know how to alleviate that suffering. Maybe I've had something go on emotionally in my life, but I've been so busy that I've not had an opportunity to really feel through those emotions. And now they're setting in as feelings that maybe I don't want to take forward. Okay, what can I do to alleviate that suffering? I can take some time and journal right now. I have the time. Let me just journal out what those emotions were so that I can see them. Okay, so I've taken it from just sitting there to an action. I've acknowledged it, now I have an action. And so that time is your time to really hear yourself and to talk to yourself. Fine if you don't want to do it out loud, if you don't want to look like that person, but if you're not in a public place, why not? Because the more you get into that flow with yourself and you can know what you need across all levels of yourself, the easier it is then to extend that outward and to know, like, maybe sometimes I don't need anything at all. Again, as we said, maybe the action is no action, just to hear yourself and feel through it. Then I know, like, maybe sometimes the action you need from me, Austin, is no action. And that's the greatest act of compassion I can give you. But it also allows my internal world to know that the inner critic doesn't get to drive it. And that I will take the time on a regular interval to hear myself. And suddenly my brain chatter starts to drop because I know that I'm going to hear myself. Just like our team members know, like if there's an emergency, yes, reach out to us, always. But otherwise, they know they're going to get heard at the times that we have set. And so it's like, okay, I don't have to worry because they do hear me and they are present with me when they hear me. And it makes all the difference in the world. And so when the inner critic goes, what? Not. Your inner champion goes, but you will have your moment on Monday at 2:00. Take a number. It's great.
Yes. I love that. What I love about what you're bringing forward is that it's not just a platitude, and like listening to yourself is like, because that could be so etheric. Like, what does that even mean? Like, that's the problem, is I'm constantly hearing myself and it's negative and it sucks. It's like, so I love that you're really providing action tied to that, because like when I hear that, the first thing that came to my head was like that scene in Bruce Almighty, when he gets God's powers, and then he wakes up and all of a sudden all these prayers are just flooding in, remember? And he's like I can't even think. It's like he was like, okay, let me just put it in an email and then just press yes to everyone, and then the world goes crazy, and it's just like all like, instead of thought it would solve a problem, but it ends up being even worse. And so when we do take that time to listen to ourselves, and then we like, okay, let's just say yes to everything and move forward, it's like, well, that's not really that doesn't work either. So it's what you provided is a very clear, actionable, and practical step to listening to yourself and then putting an action towards that into daily life. And so the reality is like, yes, we do want to listen to ourselves, but when we can really set that time and be conscious and purposeful and intentional behind that listen, and then put an action step into that to show that we are listening, then it's no longer a platitude, and it's no longer chaos. It's true love and authentic love for oneself, which is what self-compassion is all about. And it puts us in a space to be in our best version of who we are so that we can be there for those that we love. Boom.
Boom.
Boom. It kind of reminds me of another one. Really, is a practical tool. Really is gratitude phrases, and I think that's kind of like a step in. So it's like, okay, if you are listening to yourself, then taking the time to actually give gratitude phrases to yourself is really important, because it reframes that negative brain bias and pulls you into a positive mind frame. And then you're just like, okay, I'm grateful for being calm in the chaos. I'm grateful for the way that I truly listen to myself, which then puts me in a space to be the best version of who I am to others. Well, great. Now it's just reinforcement, which is what we need. It's not just going to be one and done, right? That doesn't work. It's called a practice for a reason, because you have to continue to practice it. And so that's where these gratitude phrases can come in and really set the tone for what we desire to experience. And as we talked about, gratitude is that key to abundance. And so it puts us in that space of what we were talking about. When we do desire to give that love and compassion to others, we want to do it from confidence, abundance, and true authentic love. Okay, great. Well, then start giving that to yourself through gratitude by being that unlocking key to abundance. Like, gratitude is the ultimate feeling of, like, when you're in gratitude, like, it is love. And it's not like I'm just sitting here and being like, okay, thank you, Austin, for being you. It's like, no, that's not getting me anywhere. Like, it's true, authentic. Like, thank you. Like, I'm in such gratitude for the love I'm seeking to give myself. Like, I mean, we've talked about this. Like, we're going to put things up on our website to kind of show what options are, but it's really limitless. I don't know. Do you happen to have any gratitude phrases that you may use that might be helpful?
I use so many. And for me, I build this upon the mirror technique.
Nice.
Right? So
Yes.
A lot of these, we use these. Like, what is in the book is personal for us because we've used them and then we use them in our practice. So believe us, we're practicing what we're sharing 100%. And then in kind of just ingraining them together in a way. So the ones that I use often come from whatever I've used in the mirror technique that morning in some way. So maybe I've looked at myself and it's like, I love my amazing heart and its capacity to be a vessel for unconditional, pure divine love. And so throughout the day, it would be, I am so grateful to be a vessel for divine love in the world. And I would reinforce that throughout the day. That way I know my focus in both self-compassion and compassion to others is all around loving myself unconditionally, no matter, I'm human. I'm going to do really silly things sometimes. It's part of the learning journey. You're just like, no, that happened.
I love your silliness.
It's one of the things my son, we've all learned, like, no, that happened. I love when my son texts me and he's like, Mom, I just said, well, that was interesting and that just happened. So that's a phrase too that you can adopt in life, because it is like things just happen. And when you can be grateful for your ability to be a vessel for unconditional love, not only for others, but for yourself, that's a gratitude statement. And if you can pair it with another tool like the mirror technique, then you're just reinforcing the tools that you've utilized. So
brilliant. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I think gratitude is such a strong, strong tool because you're right. It opens up gateways for abundance, but it also opens our eyes to see how fortunate we truly are in the world, because that negative brain bias will constantly have us looking at how bad things are, the perception of the negative. And then the inner critic will jump on that train and be like, yep, let's drive that home. Let's drive that right in there, because there is so much that's chaotic in this world, right? But we have a choice in that. We can also look to the inner champion and all of the beauty and the abundance in our world. And the more we focus on that, like our energy and our reality goes to where our focus is. And so if we all pivoted to the beauty and the love and the abundance in our world, bam. That's a bam.
Yes, agreed. Well said, my love. Well said.
Thank you. What other insights and wisdoms would you share around these myths and these practical tools around self-compassion? Any other beauties and amazing tools that you would offer?
Well, on our next episode, we're going to dive into our self-care kit. And so I really feel like we touched on some good ones today, and there's going to be even more practical tools in that. So kind of want to...
Little teaser?
Yeah, a little teaser for you. But yeah, I really want to focus on providing those tools in that way. And this one, I think, was these tools that we just talked about fit really great together. They work hand in hand, and they flow well with what you said, which is the mirror technique, which is like our favorite starter technique, because it does work for the body, mind, emotion, and spirit. And so no matter whether you're just starting on your self-love journey or you're highly advanced in it, it's like it's the one you just keep going back and back and back. And you can
tell them how they can get it for free.
That's true. Well, right now you can go to silenceyourinnercritic.com, where you'll actually, if you sign up and pre-register for the book, you get 20% off when we are all ready to share the book. And in the meantime, you'll get free access to our top workshop, the mirror technique, where Amber will actually guide you through the technique. You'll get supporting emails to kind of walk you through each step for 7 straight days. And then you'll just have that, like that's yours for lifetime. So you can keep going back, reviewing, and be with us in that. And so there's also a downloadable PDF as well, so that you can actually print it out and kind of have it wherever, as you really kind of practice regularly this amazing technique. And then you can start applying, as Amber was beautifully talking about today, start applying the self-listening practical guidance and practice here, and then also the gratitude phrases as well, and just let them kind of build and snowball together. And it's amazing. You'll see an incredible impact on your life. You'll start feeling more fulfilled in your own self-love, and then you can show up even at a greater capacity for those around you.
Absolutely. And if you are enjoying these podcasts and gaining insights from the tools that we're providing, we would so much appreciate you clicking the subscribe button below so that you never miss an episode. We here at the Heart Leader podcast are part of an organization called Sweet Vera, and we are so dedicated to providing tools and resources that will continue to support you along your path to personal growth and that connection to aligning the heart and the mind. So every click that is a subscribe wherever you're listening lets us know that we're providing content that is absolutely helping you along that journey. So click subscribe, click like, let us know how we're doing along the way. We love reading the comments that you're leaving for us wherever you're listening. and sending to us at info@suivera.org. We read every one and they make our day. So continue to share with us here in the community. Until next time, I am your host, Amber, and I've been here with Austin talking about some of the tools that are in our book that will be released called Silence Your Inner Critic. There will also be some really cool things dropping out onto that website, along with that 20% discount here soon. So we'll let you know as soon as those do hit, but we look forward to continuing to see you here in the community.